Today I would like to have a closer look at the history of mid-engine cars. Where does the concept come from? How did it find its way into motorsport? And what does this have to do with the long overhang Audi architecture? Let's start with Edmund Rumpler, a young Austrian engineer who worked at Daimler in 1900 and changed to Adler, a popular German car manufacturer at this time, where he became chief engineer in 1902. In 1903, he developed the swing axle in an attempt to control the back wheels independently rather than using a live axle, and he was holding a patent for this. 3 years later, he moved to Berlin and founded his own engineering office, and in 1908, he registered the company as Aircraft Company. With 1 month delay, the second aircraft company in Germany. Aircraft's revenue engineering trend, and Rumpler wanted to be part of it. But how can you run an aircraft company if you have never built an aircraft before? Rumpler went to his fellow countryman Edrich, who was producing the Edrich Taube, and they agreed that Rumpler could build this plane in Berlin in license, the Rumpler Taube. Rumpler's company could gain a lot of experiences from this plane and optimized it. Soon the Rumpler Taube became a very popular aeroplane because of its stable flight characteristics. With these experiences, Rumpler designed many aeroplanes that became very popular during the First World War. After the war, aircraft production was prohibited in Germany, and Rumpler started to develop a car. He used all of his experiences with aircraft and started with a clean sheet of paper. Production cars at this time had the engine in front, then the gearbox, then the greenhouse, and would drive the rear live axle. With a rear live axle, the drive shafts don't have to be angled, so it's the easiest design. Rumpler wanted to create a car with a teardrop shape, so the widest and biggest volume should be at the first third of the car. The slimmer and smaller elements can be positioned towards the back. So Rumpler positioned the greenhouse first, and to create a smooth leading edge, he positioned the driver at the very front in a center seating position. The 4 passengers were sitting behind the driver in 2 rows. So the engine could not be in front anymore, and he simply pushed the engine and gearbox to the back and integrated the differential within and behind the gearbox. That way he saved the prop shaft, and this reduced the weight. The problem of this package was that there was only little space for the engine left if the wheelbase shouldn't be too long. The solution was an unusual W6 engine with 3 cylinder heads from Siemens. At the back axle, he used his patent from 1903 for a new swing axle that offered individual control of the rear wheels. We will see this rear axle concept at many other cars later, including VW Beetle and Porsche 356. Aerodynamically, the car had lots of nice features like the impressive teardrop shape, integrated headlights, lights in the leading edge of the front fender, air intakes in the leading edge of the rear fender, 2 hidden spare wheels underneath the cabin, and a fully enclosed underbody. Everything to reduce the drag of the car. At the International Auto Show in Berlin, 1921, Rumpler presented the car and surprised everybody with its unusual design, very good aerodynamics, and genius little tricks. The Rumpler Tropfenwagen was the first mid-engine mass production car, and it was even used as a taxi in Berlin later on. But there were 3 problems. The engine was unreliable, the steering was designed poorly and wobbled while driving, and there was no space for luggage. But at the presentation, Rumpler got to know Hans Nibel, head designer at Benz. We have to remember that Daimler and Benz were still 2 separate companies at this time, which were competing with each other. Nibel was impressed by the design, and he made a deal with Rumpler to build a mid-engine car in license. At the same time, they agreed that Rumpler could use a more reliable Benz 4-cylinder engine. This first Benz mid-engine car was effectively a convertible version of the Rumpler Tropfenwagen with the Benz logo. With the experience of this project, Benz built its first mid-engined race car in 1923, the Benz Tropfenwagen. It kept the Rumpler concept with the clutch and gearbox in front of the rear axle, and it had a straight 6-cylinder engine. The result was a very long drivetrain, and the 2 passengers moved as closely as possible to the engine block. The front had a live axle right in front of the pedals, and this created a very long wheelbase. The only space left for the fuel tank was above the driver's legs. The curved radiator was placed above the bodywork behind the cockpit. The car had the advantage that all heavy components were placed around the center of gravity, which made it more agile, and it was very successful in different races. Also in 1923, Ferdinand Porsche became chief engineer at Daimler, and at this time Daimler and Benz started to work closer together. They would finally merge in 1926, and Porsche and Nibel were working alongside each other. In 1928, Porsche was leaving Daimler and he founded his own engineering office in 1930. One of the founding members was Porsche's friend Adolf Rosenberger, a businessman and hobby race driver who was racing the Benz Tropfenwagen privately in the years before. With everything Porsche had heard and learned from Nibel and Rosenberger, he started the project number 22, the car which would later become the Auto Union Grand Prix race car. Porsche kept the Benz Tropfenwagen concept but tackled its weaknesses and added his own inventions. One of the problems of the Benz was that the fuel tank was in front, and because it was above the driver's legs, it was quite high. During a race, the balance would change significantly. Also, the wheelbase was very long and the car hard to rotate because of the long drivetrain. To improve that, Porsche moved the gearbox behind the differential and kept the clutch in front of it. That gave much more space at the back. He kept the swing axle construction, but used his invention of torsion springs instead of leaf springs. Then he used a V engine instead of a straight 6 to get more cylinders in about the same engine block length. With the now created space, he could position the fuel tank between the driver and the engine block, so right in the center of gravity, and the balance problems during the races would be solved. To use the cooling more efficiently, he positioned the radiator at the front of the car at the stagnation point where you have the highest air pressure. Also at the front axle, he used his torsion springs and developed the crank axle to position the axle a bit further back and reduce the wheelbase. We will later see this crank axle in the VW Beetle and Porsche 356 and many more. The Auto Union race cars were very successful with their unusual design that was well ahead of its time, and you can check out my video about the development details of the Auto Union Grand Prix cars. To understand the link to today's Audis, we have to discuss the structure of the Auto Union in a little bit more detail. Jürgen Skafte Rasmussen, successful businessman and CEO of DKW, the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer in the 1920s, bought the struggling luxury car brand Audi, based in Zwickau, in 1928. He wanted to build the first DKW car, and it was a good deal for him because he could use the car expertise of the Audi engineers and the production capacities of their not very busy production line. Audis were very expensive and not very profitable, so in 1930 Rasmussen asked the Audi engineers to develop a small mass production vehicle with a DKW motorcycle engine instead of designing big luxury cars. The result was the popular DKW F1. Many versions followed up until the DKW F8. In 1932, DKW and Audi merged with Horch and Wanderer to the new Auto Union under the pressure of their bank. In 1933, the Auto Union bought the Grand Prix race car design from Porsche and was operating the race cars from their factory in Zwickau. In 1937, DKW needed a 3-cylinder engine in the road car but wanted to keep the popular front-wheel drive. So the job for the Audi engineers was to package the longer 3-cylinder engine and the gearbox on the driven axle. The engine was too wide for a transversal layout, so they turned it 90 degrees. But the question was, how can we package a longitudinal gearbox on the driven axle? They found the answer downstairs at the race department that was running Porsche's unusual gearbox design already for years in Grand Prix racing. They scaled the design down, placed the engine in front of the axle, and that was the solution for the new DKW F9. That concept was unusual again, and if you want to see how this design developed further after the war, you can check out my video about the Audi packaging problem. So the explanation why today's Audi drivetrains are so popular for mid-engine cars is because the drivetrain concept came from a mid-engine car in the first place. Here are some examples of mid-engine cars with an Audi drivetrain. The record-breaking Gumpert Apollo, the Spiker C8, and the Koenigsegg CC, Koenigsegg first ever car. Well, I hope you like this little story about mid-engine cars and their connection to Audi. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.